Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, we're focusing on the apparel industry today, and we've invited Dian Gomes, chairman of Hela Clothing, to give us his unique insights on the topic. Next, we talk to Sabrina Esufali, head of law of Verity Research, about the Right to Information Act. And finally, Mihirani Disanayak, country manager of TNS Lanka, elaborates on TNS's island-wide survey on Sri Lanka's national unity government. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Hello and welcome to the Big Picture Business Program, Benchmark. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. Today we turn the spotlight on the apparel industry, one of Sri Lanka's biggest success stories. And who better to provide some unique insights into this industry, given the very valuable experience he has in apparel, but Dian Gomes, chairman of Hela Clothing. Good to have you on the program, Dian.
Good to be here, Savitri.
So you're wearing a new hat now.
Yes.
Enjoying it?
Of course. It's a great challenge.
How do you view the apparel industry these days?
I think apparel industry, it's a great industry. It's a tough industry. But I think it's Sri Lanka's one of the largest industries and the largest creator of employment. We have nearly, 500 factories, millions of people, depending on to the industry. It's done very well. Currently, it's about 5 billion turnover export industry. So it creates, if the apparel industry dies here, I think basically the country will really suffer. So it's so important.
Do you feel that we are putting too many eggs in one basket when it comes to that industry?
I think we are struggling in one sense, but also doing well in a different sense. The big boys are doing very well. The factories are full. They have moved forward. They have looked at different unique selling points for the country. But the smaller factories are still struggling.
So the EU is looking at a GSP plus application with more positivity. What are our chances of getting that?
I think we will get it. I have the confidence that the government is working on it positively. Most probably within the next 12 months, we should get it. If we get it, it will be a great breakthrough for us, for the apparel industry, because we'll be much more competitive. We'll be able to compete toe-to-toe with countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam. China is getting expensive. So that will give us a unique selling point for the European businesses.
So if we are looking at the apparel industry per se, and given that we are competing against some big countries also in terms of volume, what are the avenues that we should be looking at? I know the apparel industry has now formulated its third 5-year plan. It is looking at trade concessions with the EU. It's looking at bilateral trade agreement with China. There are lots of things that are happening. What are the avenues we should be looking at?
I think there are two aspects to this. The industry per se is very strong. It has a nice apex body JAF, which is working on a country strategy like the GSP plus, trade concessions, and other bilateral concessions. The industry businesses needs to work on more productivity, creating more speed, creating unique selling points, maybe working upwards on the value chain, bringing more supply chain solutions into the equation. So there are so many other aspects that the industry needs to work, and especially to make it more productive. Because we can't be the lowest cost base, just creating or manufacturing apparel to the world on the lowest cost base. We can't compete with Bangladesh, where the labor is much more cheaper. This is a labor intensive industry. So we need to attack different areas where we can be like the niche markets. We have to make the industry more exciting. We need to get a new brand that to move away from, I think we worked very hard at it, to move away from this Juki brand culture. It's a great sustainable industry. It's not sweatshop culture like some of the other parts of the world. Sri Lanka is very compliant. We don't have child labor. We don't have any factories which are, I would say, non-compliant. So with those aspects, the industry has another good 15 years to run.
Has the Garments Without Guilt strategy helped the apparel industry?
Of course. Because when you think of Sri Lanka, the first thing which comes to the buyer's mind, and it's an ethical destination. But when you think of Bangladesh or some of the other places, because of the Rana disaster and some of the other disasters, that has left a very, very negative impact on those countries. So we are still looking very positively in that aspect.
Global trends wise, what should manufacturers be looking for?
The manufacturers always look at the lowest cost destinations. That's a fact, because the apparel industry is driven by people, large number of people, and because of that, the lowest cost base, the buyers will always get attracted to it. So what is the new destination? I would say the last frontier for apparel is Africa. And the new buyers are going to Africa because it has a lot of trade concessions as well. Say countries like Ethiopia, Kenya gives absolute duty free to US. Ethiopia gives duty free to virtually 80% of the world. So major brands will always want to manufacture in those countries, which is a huge disadvantage to Sri Lanka. And also they would look at not putting all the eggs in one basket. So they would like multiple locations. That's why the larger players like Hydromoney, MAS, Brandex, and some of the other big players have operate in different parts of the world. Not because they are the cheapest, but because they need to divest from country risk in terms of the buyers. So the buyers would be more comfortable not putting all the eggs in one basket.
What about more value addition, more technology? You mentioned that the big boys are doing okay.
Yes.
What happens to the mid tier and the lower tier? Is there enough innovation going on, enough value addition going on, enough technology being infused?
Not for the small scale factories, because they cannot attract the talent. There is going to be war on talent, because the differentiator is going to be talent. How do we pick the best engineers who go and work in different parts of the world, who study in different parts of the world, who's exposed to different aspects of innovation, working with the best Sri Lankan talent? That's going to be the differentiator. So if you are too small, you can't attract the talent. And attracting the talent, the most important thing is the brand. People like to work for a brand. People like to work for companies which gives them something more than money. So that's going to be the differentiator. And that, as a chairman of Hella, that I would be working on. Branding, attracting the best talent. Because without talent, you are dead.
Any trends that we need to be looking at, Sri Lanka needs to be looking at?
Sri Lanka needs to look at a different formula. Sri Lankans are talented. I always believe, whether it's sports, whether it's engineering, whether it's medicine, Sri Lankans are world class. I have yet to come across a Sri Lankan doctor, a Sri Lankan engineer, failing. We have 200 odd people working in NASA in the United States. They are rocket scientists. And mostly Sri Lankans don't know that there are 200 people working in NASA. And if you look at all, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, there are so many Sri Lankans working in that Western Hemisphere, making Sri Lanka proud. What we need to attract some of them to Sri Lanka. How do apparel attract all of them into Sri Lanka? That is to create a new platform, a new innovative platform, sharing of wealth platform, sharing of maybe a freedom platform, because the young millennials are not like me. I joined the industry in 1990 And I was with MAS Holdings for 26 years. I saw it growing to a huge conglomerate. But the young millennial, they have different aspirations. They want instant gratification. They want things to do. They need to have more freedom. They need to startups. They want to do something on their own. So how do you create a platform for that? I think apparel industry needs to look at things differently in the next 10 years to come if they were to attract and retain talent. That's going to be the biggest challenge for all of us.
So we're going to continue this conversation. Time for a commercial break. On the other side, when we speak with Dian and continue Benchmark, he will talk about Sri Lanka's global competitiveness and whether we are actually doing enough to reach out to budding entrepreneurs. Stay with us.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC. We understand that savings provide for life's special moments. That's why we were the first bank to introduce an incentivized savings scheme, Pathum Vimana. We changed how a nation felt about savings because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Thank you for staying with Benchmark. We are continuing our discussion with the chairman of Hella Clothing, Dian Gomes. Dian, if you look at Sri Lanka's competitiveness, I think we moved up something like 5 ranks from 73 to 68 in the world's most competitive economies for 2015-2016. When you look at Sri Lanka, how do you see Sri Lanka's global competitiveness?
I think not good enough, but we can do better. Why aren't we good enough? Because it's not because our workers are not productive. It's the attitude of both the management and convincing the workers to make it a win-win situation. We don't do that. We don't do enough because it's an issue with the middle management. The middle management, once they sit in their chairs, they still try to practice the old top-down culture. We need to be very inclusive. We need to move into new areas of management and new areas of philosophy where we bring the workers to a much more empowered culture. And that is what lacks across the board. There are companies who are doing it, there are companies who excel at it, and there are companies who just do not do at all. So you got on a 1 to 10 ranking, companies which are on the high scale of 9 or 8, and there are companies which are on 2 and 3. So how do we bring everybody into a common platform? Whether it's apparel industry, whether it's ceramics, whether it's the woodworking, how do we bring them to the same platform is the issue. Now there are 2 aspects to it. One is the people who are export oriented, they had a bigger advantage because they have to compete globally and we don't have any protection. Somebody is cheaper in Bangladesh, somebody is cheaper in China, we lose our business. So we have to make it productive, otherwise we are out of business. The domestic industry boys, they don't concentrate so much. They tend to duck and dive on safeguarding themselves through tariffs, some protectionist stuff, and maybe do different way. But I think everybody needs to get into the same page. So this is an era where people are smart. I mean, when I joined the industry in 1990, Savitri, the workforce came from a very different culture, very different thinking. Today, 80% of any apparel worker has a phone, and I think 50% of them have a smartphone. They're on the Facebook. So it's a very different, work culture that you are dealing with. So how can we make them understand to make it more productive? It can't be top down. It has to be more inclusive. It has to be empowered. And if you look at the apparel industry, 90% of them are women. And they are world class. They can be made world class if you handle it right.
So we've been talking a lot about HR. Now, whatever may be said and done in any industry, there are skill gaps.
Yes.
What do we do about those? How can we bridge those gaps?
I think it must start at the school level. It must start at the university level. We tend to look at it in a very academic sense. The kids are more parrots. They tend to kind of memorize things and repeat it. And that's what I did when I was doing my A-levels. That's what we looked at, 20 years or 25 years ago. But the world is very different in terms of education. And most important thing, the differentiator is teaching leadership. Because leadership is the USP that Sri Lankans have, getting into the industry. If you look at the apparel industry in Bangladesh, 80% of the management, who runs that $15 billion industry comes from Sri Lanka. They're not run by British or the Europeans, Sri Lankans. So we have proved to the world that we have got what it takes. But why can't we do it here? That's a question each one of us needs to ask. The industry needs to ask. How can we retain these guys? Otherwise, we'll be exporting our technology, we'll be exporting our talent to the rest of the world.
Does the apparel worker get enough by way of remuneration and benefit? I'm talking across the board. I'm not talking about the select few big boy manufacturing plants. But in general, how is their welfare?
Relatively, their welfare is much better. I mean, the large corporations would give transport, would give them food or subsidized food, create very good working conditions, and most of the factories are even air conditioned, good living wage in terms of being Sri Lankan, but we can do better. We can make it much more productive. I believe if we take care of the machine operator level better, incentivizing them through productivity, we can do some wonders. We are still, a lot of people are very apprehensive of that because there's a feel that if you give them more, that you spoil them. I believe the other way around, because I always believed if you take care of the people very well and put some key performance indicators and some performance indicators to people, generally people are positive. I believe in a very positive sense in anything what I do.
Now you're a budding entrepreneur yourself. You've managed to create entrepreneurial ventures with your creativity, passions, putting those in there and doing very well with it. Do you think enough is being done in Sri Lanka to hone these budding entrepreneurs, especially at grassroots level?
No, because we don't have forums, we don't have angel investors to help these young guys. There are few foundations doing it, but we are not big enough. Sri Lanka is not big enough. Sri Lanka is not doing enough. I think the government needs to take private government partnership to create a fund for venture capitalists. I think we are not good as maybe India or the Western Hemisphere. I'm no expert on this, so I can't talk freely on this. But I see if there's a young entrepreneur, the banks, the venture capital funds, it's tougher for them to start.
If you were looking at corporates today, very briefly, what is the advice you would give them in how they will create tomorrow's leaders?
Teach them, empower them, give them enough space to make mistakes. Think that they are your children, your daughter, your son. You have to avoid and sometimes allow them to make mistakes. You have to correct them, you have to be their coach, you have to be their mentor, and each one of us at the senior management level, make a difference to 10 people. We'll create thousands of leaders. We will create thousands of leaders who could stand up to do right, who could stand up to do what is good for this country and for both business, for sports, and to make Sri Lanka proud. And that's what I would tell anybody. Go there and do it. We are not making rockets here. In my sense, I'm making bras and panties and some clothing. We don't need rocket scientists, but if we employ rocket scientists, we can do the best in the world. We can be champions.
Thank you very much, Dian. Good luck in all your pursuits, numerous as they are, and all the very best.
Thank you, Savitri.
So we've been talking to Dian Gomes, the chairman of Hella Clothing. On the other side, we have Anushan Selvaraja with more on the big picture.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC. Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
Nearly 60% of all businesses in our country are SMEs. Some of our most growth-oriented financial solutions have been customized to serve this sector. That's why we have invested over 500 billion rupees to support the backbone of our economy. Because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Hello and welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. This week we're going to take a closer look at the Right to Information Act which was presented to Parliament recently. And joining me in our studios is the Head of Law for Verity Research, Sabrina Yusufali. Welcome to the studio, Sabrina. Now just to start off with, what is the RTI designed to do exactly?
So the RTI, or the Right to Information Act, essentially is an act that allows any citizen to apply to a public authority for information. So information in this context is a fairly broad range of things. It can be an email, it can be a sample, it can be a contract or a circular. And public authorities are also defined fairly broadly. It can be your usual ministries, government authorities, provincial councils, but it also includes things like state-owned enterprises and government or corporations that have more than or less than a 25% stake in government. So it's a fairly broad range of things. So for example, if you wanted to find out how much the road outside your building costed to build, you could apply to the relevant authority and get this information quite easily.
How does the Right to Information Act function? How would citizens get access to this?
So the RTI is designed in a way that has a series of information officers that are placed in every public authority. Information officers are tasked with actually receiving and processing citizen information requests. Information officers are given a period of 14 days in which to process this request, so they can either accept the request and then furnish you with the information, or deny the request. But here's the important thing. When they deny the information request, there are very specific grounds on which this denial can be made. So for example, the Act is designed to not let information officers deny information on a wide, sort of vague, arbitrary grounds. And these denial clauses are designed in a way that actually limits the scope of discretion for information officers. So for example, you wouldn't be able to deny information if it had some bearing on the economy, for example. You would be able to deny information if it caused serious economic harm through premature disclosure. So you can see thresholds being built sort of in these denial clauses. So that's one way that the Act is designed to function. The second way that the Act is designed to function is through proactive disclosure. So this idea that a good right to information act usually recedes into the background, and the default position of government is open. So the draft of our Right to Information Act provides for this in a sense, because it mandates ministries to proactively disclose certain information in a report that is published every year. So information could include information with regards to the structure of the ministerial organization, their legislative plans, but also it includes things like the budget, expenditure, and disbursements, which are very important for citizens to be able to engage with, and the use of this act is likely to close the gap between citizen and state.
Sabrina, what are some of the improvements that could be made to the bill?
As it stands now, I think the bill is a significant improvement from the bill that we first saw, but there are certain things that I think, viewing it from an implementation lens, that could be improved. So firstly, this idea that there's no personal liability for information officers that deny information in bad faith. If you look at India's act and if you speak to India's RTI activists, a lot of them say this personal liability has really changed the game, in the sense that it has created huge amounts of incentives for public officers or information officers to comply with information requests. So India, for example, has a 250 Indian rupee fine for every day that information officers delay a request in bad faith. So I think introducing something like that into our bill can actually help mechanize the whole process and create incentives for information officers to really comply with the 14-day time period. So that's one. The second thing is that the right to information gives citizens the ability to request for information on an urgent basis. So in the event the information relates to, or in the event the citizen's life or liberty is of concern or is in danger, a citizen has the right to request for information that has to be furnished in a 48-hour period, right? However, given our contextual history where we've had widespread enforced disappearances, the only person that can actually request for this information is the citizen whose life or liberty is under threat. And this is, I think, not going to be a very workable formula specifically for families of the disappeared that are inquiring after their loved ones. So this absolutely needs to change.
Thank you for joining us, Sabrina.
You're welcome.
That was the head of Law for Veritas Research, Sabrina Yasifali. After a short commercial break, we will be back with the latest on the LNB TNS survey. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC. Gami Pubudua, our microfinance offering makes it possible for the youth of this country who have a viable business plan but but lack the funds to realize their dreams. We are committed to grassroots level entrepreneur development because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the LMB TNS survey. And joining me is Country Manager of TNS Lanka, Mihirani Disanaika. Welcome back to the show, Mihirani. Now to begin with, just give us a brief overview of the survey this time.
This April month opinion poll, we wanted to understand people's opinion about the performance of the new government after we have completed more than 8 months now. So we wanted to see their reaction.
So according to the respondents, has the unity government performed well? Have they fulfilled their promises?
If you look at the results, Anushan, we see mixed opinions still in the country. Around 52% believe that the government has performed well, and while another 38% disagree to that fact, and 10% remains unsure about the performance. When it comes to promises that they have made at the election, again 5 out of 10 people believe yes, they have made up to their promises, and around 1/3 still do not agree. Another 23% not sure about which promises they have made and which not.
In terms of nepotism and corruption, Mihirani, has the government taken adequate steps towards curbing this problem?
Still, throughout the study, we see mixed opinion, Anushan. So half of the sample that we have interviewed believe that the government has taken steps, while another 30% disagree. And 2 out of 10 people still have this uncertainty to what extent government has done to stop corruption from this country.
Finally, Mihirani, where do respondents stand on our government's economic report card, so to speak?
If you look at the survey results again, we clearly see 40% believe the government's economic performance is good and going well, and another 40% disagree, and the balance remains uncertain about the performance still.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mihirani.
Thank you, Anusha.
That was the country manager of TNS Lanka, Mihirani Disanaika. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.